Mark Leonard is the billionaire you've probably never heard of. He's founded Constellation Software, a company that today is worth $58 billion and a stock that has been an unbelievable performer, rising over 14,000% during the last 2 decades. He's worth nearly $1.2 billion, and that number should actually be higher, but he gave $2.8 billion in stock away to his kids. If you were to go and Google his name right now, you'd likely come up dry. There's only about 3 photos of the guy on the internet. He rarely speaks, with the exception of infrequent letters to investors he pens, and we couldn't find a single interview he's conducted. His resume contains a smattering of odd jobs: gravedigger, bouncer, municipal park ranger, furniture mover, and venture capitalist, among others. But his claim to fame lies in the founding of Constellation Software, a Canadian diversified software company focusing on vertical market software, now worth about $59 billion. Let's dive in. The story of Leonard's early life is marked by a diverse array of odd jobs undertaken to support his education. His journey began in the early 1970s when he attended the University of Guelph in Ontario for his bachelor's degree, followed by an MBA at the University of Western Ontario's Ivey Business School. Faced with financial constraints, Leonard juggled odd jobs to remain afloat, including the aforementioned roles of grave digging and being a bouncer at the local club. Armed with an education and a myriad of experiences, Leonard stepped into the world of venture capital. Over an 11-year span, he honed his vision for business building, drawing inspiration from his background as a Mason and adopting principles championed by investing legends like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. This VC experience was used as the basis for Constellation Software, which from the onset was focused on a roll-up strategy within the vertical market software segment. Leonard left the venture capital world in 1995 with a resolute goal: to create a company that would forever hold and nurture vertical market software businesses. For those who don't know what those are, VMS businesses are software companies tailored for a specific industry. They're usually much smaller than mass market software companies, and they're often very niche in the problems they solve. This strategic choice was driven by the realization that VMS companies, operating within specialized niches, while mundane, often provided mission-critical software solutions to their industries. The relatively smaller market size of each vertical insulated them from the competitive pressures of larger players, enabling Constellation to acquire industry leaders. The method was simple: acquire software companies with a track record of double-digit growth and commendable profits. This approach reflected Leonard's eye for identifying businesses with exceptional potential and sound management. The recurring revenue nature of VMS businesses, coupled with minimal maintenance capital expenditures, offered a compelling proposition that would later fuel Constellation's growth. So let's talk about the early days at Constellation. In 1995, Constellation closed its first acquisition by obtaining Trapeze, a provider of fixed route scheduling software for North American public transit authorities. A year later, the company acquired Harris Computer Systems, which specialized in software solutions for the utilities industry. Notably, Harris Computer Systems had connections to Ventures West portfolio companies, providing a funnel for future deals while illustrating Leonard's strategic approach. After an initial investment of $25 million from OMERS, Ontario's municipal pension plan, and Ventures West Capital, Constellation sought to diversify its shareholder base, as it's reported that Leonard and the analysts at OMERS didn't get along, which is when TD Capital Canadian Private Equity Partners injected $60 million through a private placement. A decade after being founded, the company would go public on the Toronto Stock Exchange, with Leonard valuing the company at just $75 million. This despite being its earlier funding rounds. Oddly enough, and unlike traditional IPOs, Leonard elected not to raise additional funds, with the go public solely a means to provide early investors a liquidity event. Today, Constellation Software is a Canadian behemoth in the software industry, standing as a testament to the power of niche specialization. This investment strategy has evolved the modest Toronto startup into a global industry giant with 6 distinct operating segments that cover over 100 different markets globally while employing over 25,000 people. Since its quiet debut on the Toronto Stock Exchange, the company has charted an astounding trajectory, delivering returns that have surpassed a staggering 13,000%. With its initial valuation of $70 million, Constellation Software's market value has catapulted to approximately $59 billion, a remarkable surge of around 83,000%. Alongside the quiet rise in valuation, the company has also grown its annual revenue from a meager $200 million to over $6.5 billion. The scope of Constellation's acquisition prowess is underscored by their sheer number of acquisitions. Their portfolio boasts an impressive collection of over 134 software companies acquired in 2022 alone, translating to almost 3 deals per week. The company's preferred acquisition targets are often small VMS players, with an average price tag of just $2 to $4 million, although some purchases are larger in size, such as the 2023 purchase of Optimal Blue for $700 million. This piecemeal approach has resulted in the acquisition of more than 650 companies over the years. Despite their modest size, these acquisitions, when amalgamated, fuel remarkable cash flow generation. This approach has facilitated the company's ability to consistently compound intrinsic value at a remarkable rate of return of 25 to 35% annually for the last number of decades. This success is further underscored by the fact that Constellation stock has exhibited an enviable track record of positive returns for 15 consecutive calendar years, averaging a staggering 37% annual return since its IPO. Yet despite the success, Leonard appears rather content. He's elected to forego any form of compensation for the last 3 years in a row. In 2020, he waived its entitlement to a salary and a bonus, and then has continued the trend since. In 2015, he handed over his holding company with 1 million shares of Constellation, roughly 4.7% of the company, to his kids. Today, those holdings are worth $2.8 billion. He kept less than 500,000 shares for himself. Despite Constellation Software's stature as one of Canada's most dynamic and inquisitive software companies, Leonard remains virtually absent from the public eye. His online presence is scarce, and he's maintained a nearly unheard of level of anonymity. He even went as far as to cut quarterly earnings calls in mid-2018 in an effort to remain even more secluded.
You can't see me.
In the Canadian junior markets, we don't have too many winners, but when we do, we ought to celebrate them. There's an old saying in capital markets that roll-ups go blow-up. But in the case of Constellation, they never seem to have gotten that memo. The company consistently putters along, finding great acquisitions, and lots of them at that. It's the kind of business that gives others hope that they can repeat Leonard's success. But almost every time I see companies try to do this, they fail. We don't really know much about Mark Leonard, and quite frankly, the mystery only makes him more legendary for those who have been long the stock or followed the story. As for myself, and I imagine many others, I've sat back for years and thought, hey, maybe I should buy some CSU, but I always balk at the idea because I think, can it really go any higher? It's already pretty high. And here I am watching the share price only compound and making the same silly analysis year after year. I will say a trend that I've noticed for the few companies that turn into 100 baggers, and CSU is one of them, is that the number of shares outstanding hardly moves. Looking at Constellation Software, they've basically been stuck at 21.2 million shares outstanding since first going public. Now look, I'm not long the stock and this video isn't investment advice, but if you are looking for performing names that have decades of strong track records, I think Constellation is a company that you have to have on your radar. It's almost like a Berkshire Hathaway type name, except nobody's really heard of it. And I think after almost 3 decades of insane performance, we really have to think of Mark Leonard as one of Canada's greatest business people in the history of public markets. All right, everybody, thank you for watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments section. Are you long the stock? Have you heard of Constellation Software before? What are your thoughts on CSU? All right, everybody, if you enjoyed this video, please do me a big favor. Smash that like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe if you're enjoying our content. And again, let us know what you think in the comment section. All right, I love you all. So guys, we just recently launched this channel and we noticed that 99.9% of our viewers are not subscribed. So if you enjoyed this video, we need your help in growing this channel. By subscribing, that would help us keep the lights on and make sure that our crews have jobs in these uncertain times. So please hit that subscribe button and we promise to make more quality videos that I'm sure you're going to love.